In my assessment, Vladimir Putin is winning. Russia is winning. They're winning in Ukraine, but they're also winning the battle of influence against the West. They're winning in the face of economic sanctions. They're winning. Empirically, when you look at the math, they're winning. So when you ask me whether or not Putin is getting good information from his intelligence services, when I look at my overall assessment of multiple data points, he must be getting good information. Do I know how or why? I do not. I don't know how or why it works there. I don't know how such deep cronyism, such deep corruption can possibly yield true, real results. And yet somehow there are real results happening. So it's either excessive waste and an accidental win, or there really is a system and a process there that's functioning.
So this winning idea is very interesting. In what way, short-term and long-term, is Russia winning? Some people would say there was a miscalculation of the way the invasion happened. There was an assumption that you would be able to successfully take Kyiv. You'd be able to successfully capture the east, the south, and the north of Ukraine. And with what now appears to be significantly insufficient troops spread way too thin across way too large of a front. So that seems to be like an intelligence failure. And that doesn't seem to be like winning. In another way, it doesn't seem like winning if we put aside the human cost of war. It doesn't seem like winning because the hearts and minds of the West were completely on the side of Ukraine. This particular leader in Volodymyr Zelensky captured the attention of the world and the hearts and minds of Europe, the West, and many other nations throughout the world, both financially, in terms of military equipment, and in terms of sort of social and cultural and emotional support for the independence fight of this nation. That seems to be like a miscalculation. So against that pushback, why do you think there's still kernels of winning in this on the Russian side?
What you're laying out isn't incorrect. And the miscalculations are not unexpected. Anybody who's been to a military college, including the Army War College in Pennsylvania, where so many of our military leaders are brought up, when you look at the conflict in Ukraine, it fits the exact mold of what an effective, long-term military conflict, protracted military conflict, would and should look like for military dominance. Now, did Zelensky and did the Ukrainians shock the world? Absolutely. But in that, they also shocked American intelligence, which, like you said, miscalculated. The whole world miscalculated how the Ukrainians would respond. Putin did not move in there accidentally. He had an assessment. He had high likelihood of a certain outcome, and that outcome did not happen. Why did he have that calculation? Because in 2014, it worked. He invaded, he took Crimea in 14 days. He basically created an infiltration campaign that turned key leaders over in the first few days of the conflict. So essentially, there was no conflict. It worked in 2008 when he took Georgia. Nobody talks about that. He invaded Georgia the exact same way, and it worked. So in 2008, it worked. In 2014, it worked. There was no reason to believe it wasn't going to work again. So he just carried out the same campaign. But this time, something was different. That was a miscalculation, for sure, on the part of Putin. And the reason that there was no support from the West, because let's not forget, there is no support. There is nothing other than the Lend-Lease Act, which is putting Ukraine in massive debt right now to the West. That's the only form of support they're getting from NATO or the United States. So if somebody believed Ukraine would win, if somebody believed Ukraine had a chance, they would have gotten more material support than just debt. And we can jump into that anytime you want to. But the whole world miscalculated. Everybody thought Russia was going to win in 14 days. I said that they would win in 14 days because that was the predominant calculation. Once the first invasion didn't work, then the military does what professional militaries do, man. They reevaluate, they reorganize leaders, and then they take a new approach. You saw 3 approaches. The first 2 did not work. The first 2 campaigns against Ukraine did not work the way they were supposed to work. The third has worked exactly like it's supposed to work. You don't need Kiev to win Ukraine. You don't need hearts and minds to win Ukraine.
What you need
is control of of natural resources, which they're taking in the east, and you need access to the heartbeat, the blood flow of food and money into the country, which they're taking in the south. The fact that Ukraine had to go to the negotiation table with Russia and Turkey in order to get exports out of the Black Sea approved again demonstrates just how much Ukraine is losing. The aggressor had a seat at the negotiation table to allow Ukraine the ability to even export one of its top exports. If Russia would have said no, then they would not have had that. That's like someone holding your throat. It's like somebody holding your jugular vein and saying, if you don't do what I tell you to do, then I'm not going to let you breathe. I'm not going to let blood flow to your brain.
So do you think it's possible that Russia takes the south of Ukraine? It takes, so starting from Mariupol, the Kherson region,
all the way to Odessa. And into Moldova. I believe all of that will happen before the fall.
Fall of this year?
Fall of this year. Before winter hits Europe, NATO Germany needs to be able to have sanctions lifted so they can tap into Russian power. There's no way they can have those sanctions lifted unless Russia wins. And Russia also knows that all of Europe, all of NATO is the true people feeling the pain of the war outside of Ukraine are the NATO countries because they're so heavily reliant on Russia. And as they have supported American sanctions against Russia, their people feel the pain. Economically, their people feel the pain. What are they going to do in the winter? Because without Russian gas, their people are going to freeze to death.
Ukrainian people.
People all over NATO. Ukraine, everybody knows Ukraine's at risk. Everybody knows Ukrainians are dying. The game of war isn't played it isn't even played majoritively by the people who are fighting. The game of war is played by everyone else. It's an economic game. It's not a military game.
The flow of resources and energy,
attention.
And food.
Exactly right.
I was on the front in the Kherson region, this very area that you're referring to, and I spoke to a lot of people, and the morale is incredibly high. And I don't think the people in that region, soldiers, volunteer soldiers, civilians, are going to give up that land without dying.
I agree with you.
I mean, in order to take Odessa would require huge amount of artillery and slaughter of civilians, essentially.
They're not going to use artillery in Odessa because Odessa is too important to Russian culture. It's going to be even uglier than that. It's going to be clearing of streets, clearing of buildings, person by person, troop by troop. It'll be a lot like what it was in Mariupol.
Just shooting at civilians.
Because they can't afford to just do bombing raids, because they're going to destroy cultural, significant architecture that's just too important to the Russian culture. And that's going to demoralize their own Russian people. If you like this short clip, make sure you click here to see the next clip or here to see the full podcast episode.